Shri Pradesh Amrita ki jai. Om Vasudeva. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam, with me, Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayan Dadati Swapadantika. So we have arrived at text number 4 for today's class. You can hear the line and then repeat it after I do. Didati prati grinati guyam akyati pritchati bhungte bhojayate chaiva sadvidam pratilakshanam. 3 times. Didati prati grinati guyam akyati pritchati bhungte bhojayate chaiva sadvidam pratilakshanam. Didati prati grinati guyamakyati pritchati bhungte bhojayate chaiva sadvidam pratilakshanam. This dot makes it a longer top. Offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence, inquiring confidentially, accepting prashad and offering prasad are the 6 symptoms of love shared by one devotee and another. So thus far, we found that Srila Rupa Goswami has done one thing. He's explained to us how to clear our consciousness. We said that this book, Nectar of Instruction, will take us from the platform of uncontrolled senses right up onto the highest stage of human perfection. So it's like something like if you have the experience of waking up early in the morning, well before anybody else, okay? There is a certain amount of stillness and peace. There's no disturbance of the motor vehicles and the disturbances of the passion of the day's activities. So your mind is a whole lot more peaceful, right? Or, for example, if you go on holiday to a place that's got a lot of nature away from the city center, you have a tendency to feel at peace because the disturbances have been removed. So what Srila Rupa Goswami is explaining to us in these verses leading up onto text 4 is how to remove the disturbances of our life and become more peaceful, to then experience our real connection with Krishna. We get a reception, right? In dialing in to connect with Krishna, to connect with our real self also, because we would switch off all externals to some extent, to the greatest extent possible. So here, so he told us how to, the 6 things that we mustn't do. First, how to become an empowered person so that you can affect the lives of others that you come in contact with. And how to do that? He said, what? We must control all of our urges, all of our senses, etc. in the text, in the first text. Then he told us the 6 things that were not favorable to developing pure consciousness that we need to avoid. Then he told us 6 things that were favorable. Now, in this verse, he's telling us how to associate in a correct way, right? One of the things in last week's class was the association of devotees, right? So here, Srila Rupa Goswami is explaining how do we associate. Now, in society, a lot of people associate with each other in many different ways. People have a tendency to play sports together. People have a tendency to go to movies together, to go and have a game of golf, for example. But here, Srila Rupa Goswami is explaining how we can associate with each other in a spiritual strata, right? So it's not that we come together as devotees and then we go play a game of golf. We may develop bad tendencies to one another because sports is very competitive, right? So you may start developing a desire to win the game rather than the next team, etc. So such activities will cultivate negative impact on one's consciousness. But here, he has clearly given us 6 loving exchanges that devotees should do so that they could actually have relationships in whatever relationship you are, whether you're a husband, wife, mother, father, child, father, child, etc., brother, sister. There has to be a third person in the relationship. For that relationship to blossom into something very sweet, relishable, and sustainable for eternity. And that is the Krishna factor has to be added in. So here he's explaining that offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence, inquiring confidentially, accepting prashad and offering prasad are the 6 symptoms of love shared by one devotee and another. Okay? So these activities have been going on from time immemorial. We find that, even Lord Krishna and in his descent on earth as his original form as Krishna, engaged in the same activities that Srila Rupa Goswami is telling us to do with his devotees. And their relationships were so sweet. Then you find even Lord Chaitanya, he did this. In this particular picture, Lord Chaitanya has been fasting for 3 days. Okay? And he now needed to break his fast. So Advaita Acharya, he is an elderly person. So Advaita Acharya invites Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda to his house. And he says, I just cooked in my house some very simple preparations. Some wet vegetable, rice, and shark, right? Shark is like a spinach kind of curry, right? Something soft and not very opulent. So saying this, because Lord Chaitanya was already in the renounced order of life, he got Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda to come to his house. And his wife Sita Devi had cooked a whole feast, right? When they sat down and they were eating, then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he saw that his wife had cooked such a nice feast to offer to the deity of Lord, I think it was Lord Jagannath or the Shalagram Shila, and Lord Chaitanya became very pleased because the food was not being cooked for one's own sense gratification, but was being offered to the Lord, and as ideal grihastas, that offering was then being distributed to the house guests. So we find in scripture it is said that a grihasta should cook a meal, offer it to the deity in the house, and then what must do? You must go out and ask, is anybody hungry? And if nobody comes, then accept this gift, accept the food offering. So there are so many nice stories about this. You know, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it just comes to memory now that there's this great king, I think it was Rantidev. You know, he was fasting and he was about to sit down to eat his prasad after serving everybody else. And a dog came and he gave his prasad to the dog. And all he had was the water to break fast with. And another living entity came and motioned towards wanting the water. So he gave that as well. So this mode of serving, we're going to explore quite in depth in this class. In this particular pastime, Lord Nityananda, he was playing playfully telling Advaita Acharya, oh, I fasted for 3 days, and what you're offering me was a big feast, right? That Sita Devi had cooked. Lord Nityananda said, oh, you have given, now I fasted for 3 days, and to break my fast, there's so little prashad in your house, right? So Advaita Acharya, picking up on this sentiment of joking, sort of chiding him, then he told him, you should not throw your rice on the floor. So Lord Nityananda, what happened was when he finished eating, he threw a few pieces of the rice and it touched the body of Advaita Acharya. So Lord Nityananda is an avadut. His behavior in some instances cannot be imitated. So when that rice, imbued with the bhakti shakti of Lord Nityananda, remnants from his plate, touched the body of Lord Sri Advaita Acharya, Advaita Acharya, an elderly person, started dancing in ecstasy, jumping up in the air, right? So the potency of the remnants of the great personalities is so very amazing. This principle of distributing the holy name, of offering and accepting gifts, Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport that the highest form of charity is to give some person Krishna consciousness. And he stresses that the most, you may not be able to feed another person, you may not be able to buy them expensive gifts, etc. But the gift which is so valuable that you have, that you can give to another person, is the holy name, right? The Maha Mantra. And we find that when Srila Prabhupada went to the West, he did this. He had no wealth to give to the people. He did not have so much of facility to cook huge amounts of prashad, like food for life or whatever, and feed huge amounts of people. He sat in full dedication under a tree and he chanted with his eyes closed, right? And the purity of his chanting affected the hearts of all the people around him. People who didn't become devotees instantly, years later, became devotees and said, actually, I met the Swamiji in Thompson Square Park. I was there when he was chanting. Right? So the holy name, distributing the holy name is the highest charity. Why? Because if an intelligent person sees a hungry man who is the son of the richest person in existence, if he simply gives him a plate of food, it's not the complete service. A better initiative would be to take, because he's going to be hungry again. So the better initiative would be to reunite that person with his rich father, because then he would get plentiful food and facility. So every person is a son of the sons and daughters of the highest personality, the supreme personality of Godhead, Krishna. So people may approach us with so many problems. We may feel compassionate and want to help people in so many ways. And one of the highest things we could do is to give them Krishna consciousness, and especially the holy name, right? Holy name and the opportunity to inquire about Krishna conscious topics. So you find that Srila Prabhupada, these are all points from the purport, incidentally. So Srila Prabhupada, he did this, he practically demonstrated that he got people from the street, and what did he do? He chanted for them, and then he gave them philosophy, and at the end of the class, this really impressed me as an individual. You know, I was a seeker looking for higher spiritual understanding, and I went to many avenues to search for spiritual knowledge. But one thing that stood out about the Hare Krishna movement is that at the end of a discourse, they give you an opportunity to ask questions. They're prepared to sit up to late hours in the night and answer your questions, right? So this opportunity to inquire about Krishna conscious topics is a unique gift that is there in our lineage. Since Krishna consciousness is inherent in every living entity, everyone should be given a chance to hear about Krishna, especially to hear the holy names. So people that you and I encounter in life are more than likely besieged with so many problems, so many difficulties. And because as a compassionate person, as a Vaishnav, you emanate a certain energy, it seems, people automatically want to come share their troubles with you. You know, I can tell you that people who never ever before sometimes can come and tell you their biggest secrets in life, and they just need someone to hear them out. And then when you hear them out, they're so willing to hear what you have to say in terms of Krishna conscious advice. So the root cause of all problems that people have, Prabhupada summed up: birth, old age, disease, and death. So every problem everyone is has experienced, or is experiencing, can be tied down to actually this is the root cause: birth, death, disease, and death. So it's actually our separation from Krishna and having accepted this material existence, in other words. Then revealing one's mind and inquiring confidentially. Prabhupada explains in the purport: an experienced devotee explains, and an inexperienced devotee learns from him. So it does not mean that an experienced devotee is necessarily someone who is long time in the movement. Because sometimes, and God forbid that it does not happen to any one of us, that the only thing that happened is different from last year and this year, as we accept ourselves to be devotees. Our spiritual advancement has not really propelled us higher. So we should rather become experienced devotees by studying the purports of Srila Prabhupada, chanting seriously, etc., so that we can affect the lives of anyone that come within our reach in a positive way. Members and supporters inquire about devotional service, and devotees explain. Now, sometimes people feel awe and reverence when they're in the company of devotees, but they feel that maybe their questions will be a little silly, right? So they're shy to ask. One of our teachers told us when we were studying at the VIHE courses, he said, it's better that you're silly for a few moments when you're asking the question than remaining silly for the rest of your life. And I thought it was a brilliant point. So, it requires some humility that we could reveal even whatever stupidity we assume is there in the heart or whatever. But with sincerity, if we come to a devotee and we make inquiries, then the devotee, out of compassion, will disseminate this illustrious knowledge to us and help us to make progress. Then offering and accepting Prashad. Devotees arrange Hare Krishna festivals and Sunday feasts to lavishly distribute Prashad. Members and supporters invite devotees to their homes for prasad. So a lot can be said about this. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is quoted in this purport that I encourage you to go and read at home. And he says that the opposite of all of these activities that is being encouraged here, actually, these activities that are being encouraged here should not be engaged with karmis, with non-devotees, with mayavadis, with atheists, etc. And he explains that when people are inimical towards Krishna consciousness, and you sense that, then you mustn't make an endeavor to try and impose all of this onto them. Why? The analogy is given, milk and bananas is very nutritious, but milk and bananas, when fed to a snake, increases its venom. So thereby, if a person is already not, is a little animal, antagonistic towards the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and you try to persevere and impose your understanding upon the person, you may be creating a great disservice. So actually, Srila Prabhupada, this is from the purport. It is the negative injunction of this verse that we should refrain from giving anything to or accepting anything from the Mayavadis and atheists. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has also warned, Vishayira ana kaila dusta hayamana. By eating food prepared by worldly minded people, one's mind becomes wicked. Unless one is very advanced, he is able to utilize, unless one is very advanced, he is unable to utilize everyone's contribution to further the Krishna consciousness movement. Therefore, on principle, one should not accept charity from the Mayavadis or atheists. Indeed, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has forbidden devotees to associate even with ordinary men who are too addicted to material sense gratification. So, this is a very interesting statement that has been that has come up in the past 3 classes. From the first class, when Asita asked, "Can we eat in restaurants, outside the Krishna conscious restaurants?" And Nishingananda Prabhu gave the answer that we should basically try to eat Krishna Prasad. All through up until this 4th verse, this point has come up again and again. And here it is being explained, by eating food prepared by worldly minded peoples, one's mind becomes wicked. And that's Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's words. Why? Because the consciousness is transferred into grain. So when grain is cooked, then what happens? The cook's consciousness goes into that, and when you eat it, you're assimilating that person's consciousness. Dairy products and milk and dairy products is the worst conductor of karma. So if you're fixed and you reach for a ahimsa dairy product, it's the best thing to keep yourself from taking on other people's consciousness. So that's why you find when we go to people's houses, they sometimes will offer, if they're not following properly, they offer you hot milk. Especially when we would do door-to-door in Indian areas, etc., selling sets of Srimad Bhagavatam, people would come and they would offer you hot milk. Right? They won't offer you grain because that they understood that culture. So this Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has forbidden devotees to associate even with ordinary men who are too addicted to material sense gratification. In 1972, Srila Prabhupada, he took occupation of the Juhu land in Mumbai. And at that time, there was no facility for devotees to live. So they had put up like tents, and the devotees were living there. It was exceptionally hot weather. If you've ever been to India during our winter periods here in South Africa, because they're in another hemisphere, they're like, it's so hot there. I know for a fact that sometimes it gets to 55 degrees. One year, we made the fatal mistake because the travel agent had cheap tickets during July. So we wanted to go and study in the VIHE. So we bought the cheap tickets and we went to India. And when we reached Vrindavan, it was 55 degrees. So hot weather. So when Srila Prabhupada established when he took occupancy of the land, the Juhu property, at that time there were already some buildings and tenants were living there. So some of the buildings, they were just houses and they didn't have bathroom facility. So the toilets were in a separate sort of block. So when the devotees went to stay, they were staying in tents. Very hot weather. So there was no toilet facility for them. So they were going and using the toilet facility that was in the common area for the tenants. And Srila Prabhupada did not approve of that. He didn't want the devotees even sharing that facility with them. So then the devotees dug a hole in the ground and they made four sheetings, put sheeting around to make the walls. And that was their ablution facility. And then, because it was so hot, they would sometimes like to go. They had no fridges. There was no bar fridges or, ice water canisters anyway. So they would go to these tenants' houses to ask for ice water. So just to have, ice water, because you know how dehydrated you can get in that weather. So they would go to drink ice water and the people would sit them down and gladly give them ice water and conversation would begin and it would be casual conversation and eventually it would become a little critical, etc. When Srila Prabhupada heard the devotees were going to have ice water at the houses of the tenants, he stopped that. He said he didn't approve of that, right? Because such casual association can lead to a contaminating circumstance in that say something or the tenants would find a reason to criticize and engage in some aparad or negative feelings towards the devotees. So this association with materialistic people was Prabhupada was very, very strict about this. I think it was in I think 2 years later, in 1974 perhaps, Srila Prabhupada was invited to Pune, right, to a family of 3 brothers, very wealthy. So they had 60 acres of land that they were considering giving to Srila Prabhupada, right, for the Hare Krishna movement. So Srila Prabhupada, he went there with some of his disciples and they were scheduled to stay at that house for 3 days. So Srila Prabhupada, the next morning, was up translating his books and speaking to the dictaphone, and he heard some noise. So he called the devotees. See, Prabhupada was given one room and another room next door. All the male devotees were sharing. So then Srila Prabhupada called for his secretary and he asked, "What's that noise?" So the devotee said, "It's snoring, Prabhupada." So Prabhupada said, "I know it's snoring, but, pack immediately, we will leave." Now that's like 4 o'clock in the morning. So the day before, he had cooked a magnificent feast and they had served the feast and the devotees had ate sumptuously. It's okay. Accidents happen, sorry. You want to refill that water? Okay. So what happened was that the devotees had eaten. Srila Prabhupada told the cook, he said, "Normally I eat 2 chapatis, but today I've eaten 5 chapatis." right? So the devotees, they actually, you know, had eaten a sumptuous feast, and then they were, you know, were taking rest. And Prabhupada said to his secretary, go and wake them up, and we will leave immediately. We will leave immediately. We must leave this house immediately. They said, Prabhupada, you know, we told the host, the arrangement is we stay here for 3 days. Prabhupada said, no. At lunchtime, already your consciousness has become affected. You have not woken up in the you know, Brahma Muhurta hours, as I have trained you. Because when they were serving lunch to Srila Prabhupada and the devotees, they actually had a system. In America, it's called I think the lazy Susie. We don't have that in South Africa so much. I haven't seen it in South Africa, maybe because I haven't been around too much eating at people's houses. But in the dining room table, there's a raised portion that rotates. So all of the preparations are put there. When we were preaching in Nairobi, it was a common thing in every house. And Nishingananda Prabhu had to give a class about that. So they have this raised portion in the center of the table. All the preps are placed there, and it swivels around. So should you need something, everyone sits, and should you need something, you take as you go. So one person is not serving as is in Vaishnav culture. So what happened was that Prabhupada said their consciousness, everyone was eating, and with their contaminated hands taking, you know, prasad again without washing hands, and then reserving, etc. He said that has now permeated your consciousness, this laziness. Therefore, you're not waking up. The devotees have not woken up. So he made the secretary go and wake up everybody. And by the time the hosts woke up at about 6 o'clock, all their bags were packed, and it was at the entrance, and Srila Prabhupada bade them goodbye. And Prabhupada said, when he was asked, what do we tell the host? He said, you can just say that I am not feeling so well. I'm having some problems with my digestion. And and the devotees left. So Prabhupada was very, very particular that the devotees don't become contaminated by too much of mundane association. Then this giving and accepting of prasad, of gifts and charity, etc., has to have one specific quality. You all know the story of Duryodhana. In the time before the great Kurukshetra war, he cooked an elaborate preparation of, you know, he made elaborate preparations to feed Krishna. He came to that place. What did he do? He simply went to the house of Vidura. And in Vidura's house, what happened? His wife was so enamored in her devotion towards Krishna that Krishna came to our simple abode, that she was peeling the bananas, and she was throwing the banana and feeding Krishna the peel. And Krishna was eating the peel. Now, if you ever bit into a peel of a banana, it's not palatable at all. So Krishna, he was accepting it as if it was the greatest nectar, because Krishna sees the intention more than the external. Same thing with Sudama. You know, he accepted the chip rice from Sudama, even though it was the cheapest thing in the marketplace. Why? Because Priti Lakshanam, the symptom of love, was there. So this symptom of love is an amazing thing. And you see, Krishna taught many principles, but it comes as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to practically demonstrate it, and he leaves many lessons for us practitioners for years to come in the pastimes, or in the pastimes that he performed. So one day, Jagannatha Pandit saw the Lord Paramananda and Ramachandra Puri paying obeisances to each other, embracing each other, and engaging in conversation. He decided to invite the three of them to eat. He arranged for copious amounts of Jagannath Prashadam to be brought for them and fed them very well. When they finished, so Jagannath Pandit invited them, fed them, and then when they finished, see, he was serving, so he didn't eat with them. Ramachandra Puri, when they had finished, Ramachandra Puri himself told Jagadananda to sit down and take prasad. He took special care of him, personally serving him with the Lord's remnants. After Jagadananda finished eating, however, he criticized Mahaprabhu's followers, saying, I heard that Chaitanya's followers were big eaters. Now I have seen with my own eyes that this is true. To feed a sannyasi excessively leads to the destruction of religious principles. A renunciate who eats as this much will find that his vows will dissipate. So he did one thing. He fed and then he criticized. So what was absent in his heart, in his service? Love, Priti Lakshana, right? The symptom of love was missing. Now, there's even a pastime of Lord Krishna. There in Nanda Maharaj's house, in their dwellings in Nandagram, there's like a sort of courtroom where the singers come and entertain them, the Kataris come and, speak Katha, and people are absorbed in that. So one day, while they were doing that, Srimati Radharani, she and her first cousin, like sisters, their fathers were brothers, Chandravali. So, she went to Chandravali's house, and Chandravali made hot milk for Radharani. And the milk was so hot that Radharani burnt her lips. Sometimes if you take a cup of milk and you don't know the temperature, it can happen very easily. So Radharani's lips got burnt. At the same time, Krishna's lips burnt in that while he was in the court area of Nanda Maharaj, courtyard area of Nanda Maharaj. So then when he was coming, then Radharani left and she went away to her house, after the Sangha association. Then when Krishna was coming, he passed Chandravali's house. And she noticed that Krishna's lips was burnt also. So she said, what happened? So he said, you burnt my lips. You burnt Srimati Radharani's lips by giving her hot milk. And, because we are one soul in two bodies, I also felt that pain. So then he instructed her. He told her something very valuable. He said, because your seva did not have bhajan, then that became spoilt. It was inattentive, right? If you are attentive, so when we engage in loving association with others, with devotees, fellow devotees, we have to be attentive. This person likes this, does not like this. It's not that Format can only eat this, 2 rotis, not 3, you'll find that if you want to serve them more and you keep forcing them out of good intention, you must understand that you're not supposed to be serving your senses. You're meant to be serving that devotee. The recipient of your service should be pleased by the manner in which you are serving. They don't like chili, you don't give them chili. If they don't like tomatoes, you don't give them tomatoes. For example, you should know something, know how to please the devotee before you do that service. So Ramachandra Puri, he was so critical that after he criticized the devotees, Jagannananda Pandit in this instance, he fell away, became a dry philosopher, and one day he even criticized Lord Chaitanya. He went to Lord Chaitanya's dwellings, he saw some ants crawling, and he said, oh, now I've caught you out. You're a sannyasi, but last night you were eating sweets, molasses in this place. Therefore, there's ants. Ants don't come if there's no sugar. So, therefore, you are, this is not proper behavior for a sannyasi. Every time Ramachandra Puri made his criticism, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu minimized his eating, right? Because the way a devotee behaves externally actually can affect another person's consciousness. So one has to be attentive to that. So in Chaitanya Leela, we find that there is a devotee called Raghava Pandit. So Raghava Pandit, he was so very, very amazing in his devotion to Lord Chaitanya. And he had a sister, Damayanti. So Damayanti and Raghava, they would cook, right? And listen to this in the CC. This pastime is mentioned, and we're reading from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adilila 10:26. The foods Damayanti cooked for Lord Chaitanya when he was at Puri were carried in bags by her brother Raghava without the knowledge of others. So they would make extensive preparations to send Prashad to Lord Chaitanya, and a long distance at that, also away from where they were. But they wouldn't broadcast it to others. So it's not like you do a service and then it's something to talk about and to show off about that. Oh, so and so, the GBC came to my house, or the temple president came to my house, or this big devotee came to my place, and I served this person, and I got to do this, this, and this. No, we don't talk about it. So Raghava, he carried the prasadam. He carried the prasadam that his sister gave, and it was bags full of food prepared very nicely by his sister Damayanti. Damayanti made varieties of unparalleled food, just suitable for Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to eat. The Lord ate it continually for 1 year because she was so expert. She dried things. And if you read Prabhupada's letter books, you find Srila Prabhupada is telling devotees, there's exchanges that, okay, you can send me dry banana chips. So they would sun dry it, and then they would pack it, and Prabhupada would have it for so many months. They would do the same, I think, with Karela. So Damayanti was so expert. She knew the foodstuffs Lord Chaitanya liked. She knew how to preserve it in such a way that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could eat it for a longer period of time. So she was very expert. These are the names of some of the pickles and condiments in the bags of Raghava. So they give you all the names. And with great attention, Damayanti also made dried bitter vegetables into a powder. There was no Himalayan Karela capsules in those days. Damayanti made her own. Since Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he extracts the purpose from everything. He accepted Damayanti's affection for him, and therefore he derived great pleasure even from the dried bitter leaves of shukta and from the sour condiment. Now, Damayanti, she was thinking that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is going to be eating so much of rich foodstuffs. And when a person eats rich foods, what happens? Indigestion. Oh, in the old days, they used to say, after the feast, Sunday feast, it's time for LSD, left side down, right? So you got to lie down, left side down. So Damayanti was quite aware of the fact that Krishna, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will be fed all these rich things. And she was thinking, then he gets some indigestion, so overload on the liver and the bile duct, incidentally. So then what would happen? He needs something bitter, right, to help with the digestion of rich foodstuffs. So thereby she prepared the bitter condiments. Now, you may think, we just came out of the discourse. And, we heard that Krishna, who is no different from Lord Chaitanya, he showed his universal form to Arjuna. And in that universal form, what was he eating? Everything. You looked at the picture, he's eating the soldiers, Karna and everybody is entering into his mouth. He's, so many things are entering his thousands of mouths. He didn't get acidity problem then. So now how is he going to have acidity problem? So it is being mentioned here that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he extracts the purpose from everything. So out of her love, Priti Lakshana, she is thinking in this way. And because she's thinking in this way out of her love, the Lord is thereby reciprocating. He doesn't need it, but he's going to accept it. So then, because of a natural love for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Damayanti considered the Lord an ordinary human being, therefore, much like Mother Yasoda, right? Therefore, she thought that he would become sick by overeating and there would be mucus within his abdomen. Because of pure love, the devotees of Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan Vrajabhumi loved Krishna as an ordinary human being like them. Yet although they considered Krishna one of them, their love for Krishna knew no bounds. Similarly, because of external love, devotees like Raghava Pandit and his sister Damayanti thought of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a human being, but their love for him was boundless. By overeating, an ordinary human being becomes prone to a disease called Alopecia, which is a product of indigestion characterized by acidity of the stomach. Damayanti thought that such a condition would afflict Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So when a person's body is too acidic, then they start putting on it, you start getting a big belly. Because why? All your organs inside, they actually are fighting in an acid environment for survival. So they produce fat and mucus around to sort of insulate themselves for protection. So acidity is a very acute problem. And they, out of their love, they projected that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu may be in need of these things. Affection, she thought eating shukta would cure the Lord's disease. Considering these affectionate thoughts, of Damayanti, the Lord was pleased. So he extracted her love, sentiments within that action of sending the bitter things. And then you can see that actually she took great care to prepare many other things. And then her brother, she would pack them very amazingly. She would put the small bags into the large bag, and they were put in 3 bags like that. And this was carried a long distance. You can't walk that distance in current day. But they walked the distance, and Raghava and his 2 assistants. Then this thing about prasadam, what's so great, because everybody's eating. So sometimes you think, okay, why must I give prasad? I don't have time to cook, etc. I can buy them, something and give them non-prasad. There's a special gift in the potency of prasadam, right? There's actually a special gift. So I thought to share with you all some very amazing statements about what exactly is the potency of Krishna Prasad. One who takes the food that was previously accepted, these are quotes from the Hari Bhakti Vilas, compiled by Sri Sanatan Goswami. One who takes the food that was previously accepted by Murari, another name for Krishna, killer of the Mura demon, attains the pious results of 10,000 times 10 million fire yagyas, just by honoring Krishna Prasad. This verse explains that in the Kali Yuga, a person who eats the remnants of food offered to Lord Vishnu gets the same pious credits as if he's been observing a fast for 6 months. So sometimes His Holiness Giriraj Swami was giving a lecture, and he was explaining how in the early days of preaching in Boston, they used to get a lot of macrobiotic followers. Those that follow a macrobiotic diet, they would come to the Hare Krishna temple, and the Sunday feast, there's what? Fried puri, then there's fried gulab jamuns, then there's fried paneer, then there's fried brinjal and fried potato, etc., 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 right? Then there may even be halwa with a lot of butter on top, etc. So they would decline to take prashadam because it was not according to their diet. Sometimes you get people observing religious feasts and when as religious fasts, and when they come to the Hare Krishna temple, they may refuse to take prashadam. So here, this verse is saying that if you honor some prashad, a little prashad, it's as good as your 6 months of fasting. In the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, it is stated that a person who happens to eat the remnants of food offered to the Lord in the association of sadhus gets the results of performing 60,000 years of austerities. To honor prashad in the association of devotees, one has this benefit. Narad Purana explains, one who happens to eat the remnants of food offered to the Lord definitely attains liberation. So when you give prashad out, when it's, when Prabhupada said in the beginning of the purport that the Krishna conscious activities is the highest welfare work, when you give Krishna Prasad to a person, you're giving this person the opportunity to actually raise their consciousness to such a great extent that they will undoubtedly not be able to perform in this, under normal circumstances, not be able to attain in normal circumstances. If he rejects the remnants of items offered to Lord Vishnu, which are being presented to him by some good fortune, such a person loses his wealth, beauty, his intelligence, and knowledge. So if one is disrespectful to prasadam, now you just say you have a serious health issue. For example, you're gluten intolerant, and you go to the temple and they're offering you full of gluten prasad. It's going to make you sick. It's medically certified that you can't accept this diet. It's going to harm you. The way you respect it is you mentally honor it, okay, with deep respect. You can even accept it and distribute it to somebody else, right? But you don't reject it. When Haridas Thakur was chanting his rounds and he was offered Mahaprasad, he offered his respects to it and then continued his chanting. One who immediately and with devotion accepts the sanctified remnants of items offered to Lord Vishnu becomes liberated in the self-same body as the only one out of hundreds of excellent persons. So, honoring Krishna Prasadam, giving and accepting, can you see, it is so much more potent than playing a game of tennis together, for example. It is such a deep, loving reciprocation that we're being introduced here by Srila Rupa Goswami, right? It is such a high activity, so highly beneficial for both parties that are engaging in it. Then he says, the breeze that touched the body of a saintly person purifies tons of holy places, O fool. The dust of his feet purifies the earth planet. So a Vaishnav's presence is so auspicious that even the breeze that touches the body of a Vaishnav, is being said here, if it comes your way, it is glorious. What to speak of the footprints touching the earth of your abode, your home, right? It makes the whole place so sanctified. So this culture of serving prasad. One time, Srila Prabhupada, in the early days when he went back to Mayapur Dham, then in Mayapur, they were invited to Puri Maharaj's ashram, one of our Gaudiya Math temples. The Chaitanya tree has several branches. So, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's disciples all have their own temples. So one very illustrious personality, Puri Maharaj, he was very close to Srila Prabhupada. So his ashram, they invited Prabhupada together with all his followers to come have Prashad. So Srila Prabhupada gave them Lakshmi to cook and feast. And he took his disciples there. And the cook, Anand Prabhu, he was a very exalted devotee. But he took great pleasure. He cooked this amazing feast. He even had French fries, right? So many sabji, so many sweets, so much puri, etc., etc., etc. And he was serving the devotees. So he served all the devotees and he never ate himself. So then, after the feast, Srila Prabhupada was sitting at the end of the veranda, so the veranda where they were feeding, and the devotees were in two rows, and Prabhupada had his hand in the bead bag, and he was watching this entire thing. And at the end, he told the devotees that were around him, he said, after one such feast, Prabhupada called the devotees to his room, and he remarked, see how he is cooking. He cooks everything, he serves it, and he doesn't eat until everyone is fully satisfied. This is Vaishnav. How he should act. He is more satisfied to serve than enjoy himself. So sometimes when you're serving your favorite preparation, perhaps at the temple or a devotee function, and just say pizza is your favorite, and you're serving the last 3 pieces, and you think, oh, now I'm not going to have anything to eat. And you're really looking forward to eating that. You will find actually if you serve it out, you sacrifice that and you serve it out, amazing things can happen. One devotee was telling me he did like that, and the next week, mysteriously, someone invited him to a pizza feast where he was on the eating end, and there was so much more pizza. So it can happen like that. When you sacrifice, for personal gain, something, Krishna can reciprocate in many ways. Not that we do it with that intention, but it can come like that. So, are there any questions or comments? What's the time? Giving and accepting Prashad, yeah. Yeah.
So, most of the people, they took it and she walked, she just put her hand through. I don't know if she's going by him, but she also looked for me. There was nothing. And there was a foot back, and she just walked away.
Yeah.
Now she touched it, and she accepted it, but yet she dumped it.
Mm-hmm.
The person like that, what happens to them?
The question is that during Food for Life, what's your name, Prabhu? Pranesh Prabhu had an experience that someone accepted the plate of biryani that he was offering, that they were serving to everybody. Then she felt around with her hands and couldn't find the pieces of meat, so she just ditched it into the nearest bin. So his question is, what happens to the person in that circumstance? My understanding is we have in our area of influence, we have done what we can. We've given an opportunity. Our business is simply to create opportunities for people without being attached to the results. From our side, we have done what we can. From her side, she has committed and she's accepted it, first of all. So there's some benefit. But in her ignorance, she's committed an offense by throwing it away. So that's between her and Krishna. Who knows what is, what's in that equation. But we should worry about our circle of influence, that we have from our side done something. One other thing about that I wanted to discuss was, Prabhupada says giving and accepting in charity. So sometimes people question, should we give to the needy and underprivileged charity? At street corners, you find people knocking on your vehicle window and begging food, begging for money, etc. So what happens in such a situation? So I was listening to various conversations, and devotees who were in Srila Prabhupada's presence said that many times Srila Prabhupada, people would knock on the windows of the vehicle that he was traveling in. He would look straight ahead and continue. However, when Prabhupada took the devotees to the Kumbh Mela festival, he asked that all the people that were bringing paisa, sort of coins. So he asked the devotees to save all of that. And the next morning, when they were walking around, he said to the beggars who are simply sitting, you get beggars, you sometimes have a line of beggars, and they are simply sitting with their begging bowl and depending on the Lord. Sometimes they have broken legs, etc. So he said, those beggars, he was giving them a paisa each, so to, like that. So he said that if you don't give in charity, your heart becomes hard. So as majority of our members here, that we associate with are all in Grihastha ashram, living outside the monastic life of an ashram, etc. So when you work and you're getting money, or you're running a business, you're getting your salaries, etc., you're incurring a certain amount of karma. We discussed that in the other course, right? So that karma, a grihasta, because they're accepting money in so many different avenues, etc., the karma has to be nullified. And thereby they give grains and in charity to the brahmanas. So that becomes nullified. So the whole system in the Vedic Varnashram system is like that, to help both parties. And then Prabhupada said in the one purport that we read, that you should not, you remember I misread it and Shingananda Prabhu corrected me, you should not accept what you are unable to engage in Krishna's service. This brings to mind a very interesting story of it's Srila Raghunath Das Goswami. He came from an exceptionally wealthy family. His father and father's brother, uncle, were so wealthy. They were like the kings in the area that they lived in. So when they saw a devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and they inquired about Raghunath Bhatta's well-being. And the devotee said, he's doing very well. He's very renounced. He's living by begging at the Simadwara gates of the Jagannath temple. So the father and the uncle, they sent some workers with coins, with a lot of money, to go and help him, because he's begging nowadays. This devotee, Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, he did an amazing thing. He never touched that money. It was in his, it was sent for him. It was made known to him. He never touched the money. On 2 days of the month, he would have a feast at his house in which he would invite Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to come and eat. At that time, he would cook several preparations. It was only for that service to Lord Chaitanya, to make that feast for Lord Chaitanya and his associates, that he would use that money. For his personal needs, he wouldn't take it. So there are many stories like that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that have very good examples. Yes, Prabhu?
Sometimes you go for the feast.
Yes.
And they give a lot of food.
Yes.
And then when you go to throw your plate, you see that there is a lot of food, prasad, thrown into the bins at the temple. Can you talk a little bit about that?
On the point of not using
Well, actually, in the line of this question about whether you are able to, how much prasad should you accept, and the question of prasadam being wasted. So, when I was preparing for this class, I forget exactly where it was that I read in the CC somewhere, one of these feast pastimes of Lord Chaitanya accepting a feast. He asked for 2 plates. So 1 plate they would serve to their heart's content, and the other plate he would take as much as he needed. So a Vaishnav, in Vaishnav etiquette, we learn that a Vaishnav never leaves remnants on his plate or her plate. Okay? Prasad is non-different from Krishna and it should not be wasted. So we cannot change everybody, but we can work within our circle of influence. We can change ourselves. So for ourselves, if you're being served at the temple and you go there quite often and you know they serve too much prasadam, more than you're able to eat, you should either take it home and or if you're eating there in the association of devotees, which is a good thing, you ask for a 2nd plate where you can take as much as you need, and the rest you can either give it to the another person. There are a lot of hungry people, the guards at your complexes, etc., will accept this prasadam. And prasad is attractive. So we take as much as we need. In two classes previous to this one, we said that we accept as much as we need, not according to our greed, right? So we take just that much. And then perhaps, like sometimes devotees make mistakes. Like one time, instead of putting sugar in a preparation, they put salt. And it was served in the feast. Nobody tasted it. So, what do you do in a situation like that? You can't eat it. It is Krishna Prasad. You respect it, but it's okay to give it to other living entities. There's living entities everywhere. The important thing is not to be disrespectful and throw it in a place where it will be trampled on. Now, in connection with your question about, you see so much prasad in the bin, the preferred thing would be to have a separate bin where if someone perhaps is allergic to brinjal and somehow it came in their plate without them noticing it, and they, for example, need to, dispose of it, there's a separate bin where they can throw the food remnants and their plate in another bin. And that can be given to animals, etc., or buried like that. We used to have a hole when we lived at the temple, we had a hole, and excess prasad that was going off, etc., would be put into that hole. No one would walk and trample it, and at a certain point that would be covered. So it wasn't, there was no disrespect. Birds would eat from it, etc. So you get those little squirrels, etc., going and eating this. So the living entities benefited from it. So unfortunately, we can't change other people as much as we can tell them that do not throw prasad. But if they choose to throw it, then not much we can do. Yes, Prabhu? Your remnants. That's why it said a Vaishnav should not leave remnants. So do you take the karma of the insects that eat your remnants? I have no understanding of that, Prabhu. The preferred thing would be not to leave remnants in your plate, and in event like there's salt in the sweet rice, for example, and you have to throw it away, then what to do.
We should be careful about accepting more prasad but and you shouldn't be embarrassed or to say, that's too much. Because generally when you're serving, and some people don't know the etiquette, so they don't know how to serve. And you can see, let's say, if one wants, now we're going to put another spoon, you can motion them when it's too much. Sometimes if it's too much, you can say, well, let me take a quick and offload it so that you can use it in the next one. You shouldn't be, bold enough to do that. Because each grain that you waste will be added to your grain account. And in the future, you will not get or you will get that amount of grains less. So we should be very careful, especially in grains. We should be attentive. Maybe just repeat that concept.
Grains should, Prabhu made a comment that grains should not be wasted. Every grain you waste goes into your grain account as a deficit for your future allotment of grain. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's explained how souls descend into this world. When I heard the statement about this grain issue, I thought that's like a grandmother's tale. But when I was reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, I came across the point about this grain issue that made me convinced that, hey, it's not exactly the old lady's tale. It's an absolute truth. Souls descend into this world, according to the Srimad Bhagavatam, via rain. Rain is absorbed in grain. Grain is assimilated by the male and it enters the female body, and that's how the souls descend. So when you waste grain, it's potential life. So it's so important not to waste the grain. It's in the chain of a jiva reaching its ultimate destination. So it made perfect sense. And thereby I accepted it, and it resonated in my being that this is not a fable of any type, but it is the absolute truth. Yeah. Does anyone have any other points of interest that they want to talk about?
The loving exchanges which are here increases attachment, loving attachment with devotees. So instead of focusing on other activities to increase one's loving attachment, these are the activities we should be focusing on.
Yeah. And then it was also mentioned that one should inquire confidentially and reveal one's mind in confidence. That I neglected to touch on. And since we do have time to touch on that, I think we should discuss that a little more. So it's explained that a person should come to you and in the loving exchange between two people, the one party may have a problem. And maybe you're the last person that this person is reaching out to. They're at the tether's end, so to speak, right? And they need a shoulder to cry on. They need someone to hear you out. So that confidentiality, that trust that they place in you is of paramount importance to them, and you should thereby honor it. It is the greatest disservice when someone tells you something in confidence to then go and tell it to somebody else. So inquire confidentially and reveal one's mind in confidence. So what happens is that our minds are very messed up because we have certain opinions about how things should be, right? We have certain opinions of how our Krishna conscious journey has to be, etc., etc., etc. So sometimes it is so important not to simply accept. If you have a realization or you have an idea of how to do something, you should at least have one person that you could go to and speak about to clarify that, right? That I am on the right path. One of the important things to do in the association of devotees is to always tell a person that you have faith, trust, and a loving reciprocation with, that should you see me doing anything wrong, please feel free to correct me. And that person who you're telling it to should also be mature enough to know how to break it to you gently, right? Without any insult or any public broadcast of this, etc. So this is a very important thing in establishing relationships. One important point Srila Prabhupada made in this particular purport, and it is listed as one of the 7 purposes of ISKCON. You know, Prabhupada wrote the purposes of ISKCON. He said this Krishna consciousness movement has been established to facilitate the loving exchanges between the devotees. So it was interesting that he said between the devotees. How often it is that we decide, we take our book bag and we go and preach to other people. We're doing outreach programs. But there's a in-reach, so to speak, that is important to be established, because we depend on one another. You know, I heard there's these redwood forests. You know, the trees grow very high, and the roots, they're very shallow. What keeps these redwood trees from falling, you know, even when there are strong winds, etc., is that the network of roots underground another so intently that they keep the trees upright. So it's very important that we have networks amidst ourselves. You know, it is impossible to have these loving exchanges with every person in the society. But in the previous verse to this, it was explained that you should serve with like-minded devotees. You know, so you have to be able to understand that this is the association that is beneficial to me, and stick within those limits and grow. You know, bind your roots together and keep upright as you weather the storms of existence in this material world. Do we have any last question, comment? Yes, Prabhu? The question is, when we go out on Harinam or public preaching programs, then sometimes you're giving the holy name, and the injunction is one should not give it to the faithless, right? That it's an offense. So how do you how to gauge which is the correct circumstances to distribute the holy name? So devotees, they take a risk when they preach, right? But it's an educated guess that, you know, so in your heart, if you are exceptionally, as you know, as an amateur book distributor, I don't call myself a very qualified book distributor, but for many years that was my service from the time from 9 o'clock in the morning to 6:30 in the night, go stand on the street and distribute books, non-stop. And we would have these pep talks before we went out on the street. And one of the amazing things that I learned was that you have to understand that there's a super soul in that person's heart as well as yours, and that person is originally a loving servant of Krishna. So in that light, with purity of heart and intention, if you reach out to the souls in that way, then you find that sometimes Krishna changes them. Of course, there are some people that are totally inimical. I know that when we were going on Harinam once in Hillbrow, there was one very nice devotee, Prabhupada disciple, Adhikata Prabhu, and he was leading the Harinam party. And one bully came right up to him and punched him on his nose and broke his nose. So he had to have surgery for his nose. And with the plaster on, the next time we were going out on Harinam, that devotee was in the Harinam party on the same route. And this giant who did this to him was so humbled. He just came and he couldn't contain himself. He burst out crying and he practically, was begging for forgiveness. And the devotee, if any one of you ever know this devotee, Adhikata Prabhu, Prabhupada disciple, married to Mother Ruchira, who's also a Prabhupada disciple, he is so compassionate and he has this sentiment of spreading the Sankirtan mission, distributing Lord Chaitanya's fruits like that. He embraced the person and he told him, it's okay, and I mean, the person was so moved that, it had such an effect on that soul. So sometimes, the devotee takes a risk, but Krishna's a super soul in the heart of the next person. But of course, as you said, it's true. And as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj said, if a person is Mayavad or is trying to look for fault in the Hare Krishna movement, then it's best to give him some prasad. Generally, Krishna enters through the mouth in the belly, and then he affects the heart. So.
If I just chant the holy name, passing by, even if somebody is, MBBS, they're not going to become lyrical. They're going to hear the whole name, they're not like it.
It goes in.
They're not going to, they're not going to become aggressive. But preaching to someone and you see the person is becoming aggressive, not accepting and challenging, how you should react.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.